I was initially impressed with the really dense historical research that the filmmakers completed, and their knowledge from that incredible research really allowed them to approach this kind of dark and heavy content with maturity. So I was very impressed with the content of the biography. Emotionally, I thought that although the content was very dark, the audience recognized that it was necessary to learn about these things. There was definitely a moral connection to a feeling of justice. The audience really wants to find out how this story ends because of the terrible atrocities committed by King Leopold, and therefore they want to follow the story of Roger Casement. Um, Technically, I thought the narration being in an Irish accent, which I'm sure was probably just access of where the filmmakers were living, but I did think that the narration being in the Irish accent was very powerful. It added an extra layer to this patriotic Irish story. The script was very easy to understand and well written. It was very linear and chronological, but it definitely simplified with dignity. You know, it didn't skimp over the necessary gore, but it didn't like lead into trauma porn or anything like that. And I thought the animation was very appropriate. It was very informative.
I think using animation to portray it as well also helps to make it a digestible story, especially since it's the worst possible outcome um, in a situation like this, which is unfortunate because he was one who saw how oppression was happening in the Congo and actually wanted to take action. And as an Irishman himself, he wanted to influence others to kind of see the way that the British were ruling and how terrible they were. Um, so that was definitely very interesting to me. I just literally had no clue who he was, what he'd done, and unfortunately his terrible demise. And knowing that there were some advocates in history, some white men and white women in the past who were really advocating for freedom for all was just it's beautiful to know. Unfortunate that a lot of that's not even being discovered until now, but it's great that these stories are being told and these names are getting out there.
So I really enjoyed this animated version of Roger Casement's story because I thought visually I could really see his life story play out in front of me, and I didn't have to, try and follow along as a talking head just talked at me. Instead, I could, have this all in my head and in front of my eyes. Um, I loved the music; it was very haunting, and there was a great use of sound effects in this film to really add to the story and immerse the audience into his story. It was seamless too. I didn't really notice until I went back and really listened for those sound effects and things that brought the story to life. Um, the narration was a great performance, really easy to follow. I loved the animation um, style. In some ways, it was just still with only slight movement, which made it so that I was focusing on what was being said versus only looking at the animation. Um, like it was just enough movement and visual, dynamics that I was focused on the story and not just what I was seeing.
Really goes to show how we can have a darker element told into storytelling, but given in a palatable form, such as animation. This dives into historical movements. This dives into, um, racial history, where it points to genocide of a particular culture in Africa. It has even, it's an LGBTQ story as well. And with all of these elements, we are met with traumas of situations of to the highest extreme level in this case. What stick with me is the form of punishments. In order to save on bullets, they literally, took limbs from people, and they sat here and hung a man, and the way that they tell the story, it kind of dives into how homosexuality is a factor in his outcome of treason, for this element, as he sort of outs the truth of situations. These types of stories are usually kind of hidden or dismissed or set to be in disbelief, and it is good for us to tell these stories and get this information out there. Despite how brutal these stories go to show, it is a part of history and it is a dark truth that we have to face and acknowledge.
I like that they kind of dove into the backstory of it, of how he got to that place, and kind of why it was so important to him, the parallels that he drew, and, you know, they told you more than just what he is most known for. So I really loved that, and I thought the animation was really great. I really liked that. I think that when you're telling, a story of somebody from like a historical sense, using something like animation, using the pictures that you do have, but being able to make it come to life in that sense is really, really great, because you don't have video, or you don't have the kind of access and the kind of media that we would have today, or even in the last in more recent history. So using animation and using all of these different things to kind of bring the story to life, I thought was really, really clever.
Of the concept of short animated biopics of different figures throughout history, especially figures that may not be as well known, like an Irish rebel or an Irish revolutionary like Roger Casement. Um, it definitely goes into some very dark territory, as are many things in history. But I I learned a lot, um, and the animation was very well made, very well put together, very professional, uh, and like I can see a whole series like this on YouTube where again, short 2-3 minute biopics going in detail about different historical figures.
I think this is a really interesting character, a really interesting story that you develop in a really short amount of time. And you do a really good job of it. I think story wise, I think it's very clear what's going on. There are great transitions throughout this piece. The pacing is really great. And you're able to cover a lot within a short amount of time with this, and with a final hurrah at the end, and this it ties up the story of this character with a bow, and you do that really well in a way that seems really natural.
Thought there was great music. The music was very subtle. I like that a lot. I just thought this person was dedicated to his country, and as he said, an incorrigible Irishman. And his final word when he was hanged for treason was Ireland, which I thought was interesting. So yeah, it did its job. It kept me interested in wanting more.